My mom was a flight attendant during one of the biggest unsolved cases in FBI history. On November 24, 1971, a man named Dan Cooper boarded the plane. He called my mom over and then showed her a suitcase with a bomb inside. My mom was only 27 when she worked as a flight attendant on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 345, flying from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, on a Boeing 727. Let me tell you the story in her own words. It was windy and a bit rainy that night. I'd already done a flight in the morning, and this was my second and last flight of the day. I was feeling a little tired, but I'd taken a short nap and was ready for the second one. I put on my uniform, which included a short coat, a long skirt with a thin belt, and my hat. My colleagues and I boarded the plane and did our usual checks before the passengers arrived. Our job was to inspect the aircraft and make sure everything was ready, including the safety equipment, seats, and emergency devices. We also prepped the cabin for passenger service. That meant arranging the seats, checking the seat belts, and organizing the public areas. Before we started, we reviewed the safety procedures once again, making sure we knew how to use the oxygen masks, life vests, and other emergency equipment. We checked everything and all was set for the passengers. When they boarded, my colleagues and I greeted them and introduced ourselves. I said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 855. My name is Florence Schaffner, and I'll be your flight attendant this evening. On behalf of the captain and crew, we'd like to thank you for choosing to fly with us today. If you need anything during the flight, don't hesitate to let me know. We're here to make sure you have a comfortable and safe journey. We'll be departing soon, so please make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened and your seat is in the upright position. Thank you for your cooperation, and we hope you enjoy the flight." As I made eye contact with the passengers, one man caught my attention. He stared at me and smiled, which gave me mixed feelings. At the time, I was single, and here was this young, charismatic guy smiling at me kindly. He called my name and asked for a bottle of water, and then he asked me a personal question. "How old are you, miss?" I replied, 27, sir." "You look younger," he said. "You're beautiful." Then he asked, "Can I have your number?" I said no because my colleagues were watching, and I didn't feel like I could do what my heart really wanted. Deep down, I wanted to get to know him better. I even felt a little regretful afterward, because he said he was a doctor, probably rich and well off. At that moment, I had feelings for him, and I thought to myself, maybe I can give him my number when my colleagues aren't around. But I never imagined what would happen just a few minutes later, and how I'd lose him forever. I went to the bathroom, took out my lipstick, and added some to make my lips redder. Then I used mascara on my eyes to look a bit more polished. When I came out, I saw him looking at me, blinking and smiling warmly. He whispered, "Beautiful," and I heard him clearly. I passed by him several times as I answered passengers' questions and brought them what they needed, but I didn't have a chance to give him my number. Then suddenly, a man around 40 years old, with short brown hair, wearing a black coat, brown pants, and a black tie on his white shirt, called my name. "Miss Schaffner," he said. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Please, come here, I need help," he said quietly, so he wouldn't disturb the other passengers. I walked over to him, and that's when everything went downhill. He was sitting in seat 18C, and I noticed a black suitcase on his lap. He looked at me, then at the suitcase. I thought maybe he wanted me to take it and put it in the overhead compartment or somewhere else. So I asked, "How can I help you with the suitcase, sir?" Then he opened it. That was when I felt my heart race with fear. Inside the suitcase were bundles of wires, a clock, some boards, and a display with numbers on it. There was even a blinking red light. I could barely feel my legs. He looked at me and said, "This is a bomb. If you and your colleagues, the captain, and everyone else don't cooperate with me, I'll explode it." He said all this in a low voice, right next to my ear, so no one else could hear. He didn't even open the suitcase fully, so the person sitting next to him had no idea what was going on. "What do you want, sir?" I asked, trying to sound strong even though my voice was shaking with fear. "I want $200,000, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. If I don't get what I want, this thing is going to explode." "Don't do anything stupid," he said. That was when the passenger next to him realized what was happening and shouted, "There's a bomb on the plane, he's a hijacker!" She stood up and the whole plane erupted in chaos. People started screaming and kids were crying loudly. He stood up, pulled a gun from his pocket and pointed it at everyone. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "I've told this girl what I need and am waiting for her to pass the message to the captain. If you all cooperate, you'll get off this plane safely and I won't hurt anyone. So please, don't do anything foolish." All my colleagues had been trained for situations like this. I calmly told everyone to return to their seats and to stay calm. "We're here to take care of you. Please remain calm while we work to meet his demands." I connected to the captain through the small microphone and said, "Captain, we have a situation. A man in his mid-40s has a bomb. He's demanding $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck in Seattle. He's threatened to detonate the bomb if his demands aren't met. We need to prepare for a possible hijacking." The captain replied calmly, "Understood, Florence. First, stay calm and keep in touch. We need to make sure the passengers don't panic. Let's alert air traffic control right away and prepare for an emergency landing. I'll notify the authorities about the hijacking and coordinate the fuel stop in Seattle. Be discreet with the passengers and keep a close eye on the situation. Also, make sure all crew members are aware of what's going on." "Okay, Captain," I replied, my voice shaky as I looked at the gun. I turned to the hijacker and said, "The captain is arranging everything you need, and we'll be landing in Seattle. We'll give you what you want. Please, just don't cause any more tension on the plane." He was polite, not insulting anyone. Then he asked, "Where exactly are we right now?" He looked hard at the woman across from him. The captain sighed, clearly dealing with a complication. "I'm not sure," I replied, and called the captain to ask. He responded, "Since one of the hijackers' demands is for the plane to be refueled, we need to make an emergency landing in Seattle. We're about 20 minutes away." I turned to the hijacker. "About 20 minutes, sir," I said. "That's too long," he muttered. "But I'll have to tolerate it. Ask him if everything's ready. I won't release the passengers or the plane unless I get what I want." I relayed his message to the captain, who confirmed everything's being arranged as requested. We'll exchange the passengers and give him what he needs when we land in Seattle. I was shaking, but I tried my best to keep the passengers calm. Kids were crying and shouting, and I did my best to reassure them. I quickly went through the passenger list, hoping to find the hijacker's name. Finally, I saw it. D.B. Cooper. Cooper was playing with his gun when my colleagues and I made our way toward each other. I kept thinking, is there any way we can take control of this situation? But before I could even come up with a plan, I heard the sharp sound of a Colt gunshot. Glenn Gadon shouted, "Don't be stupid. Don't play with me. I'm smart and I can read your mind. Stay right there and don't move." I froze, feeling the weight of his presence behind me. He was serious. I stood still, not daring to move any further. Then I felt that familiar gaze on me again. It was the young guy who had smiled at me earlier, the same one who'd asked for my number. I couldn't help but wonder, what if I ever see him again? Was there any chance we'd ever be friends? I imagined myself in a white gown for a second. Would I survive this? Would I make it out alive to see my family? To see the city again? My thoughts stopped abruptly when I heard the captain's voice through the intercom. "Tell the hijacker that everything is ready for him at Seattle Airport. The police are there, and we've prepared everything for the exchange: passengers, the money, and his parachutes. I hope that's acceptable." I relayed the captain's message to Cooper. What he said next made my stomach drop. "No problem," he replied. "Once the passengers are off the plane, all the flight attendants will stay with me, and we'll leave Seattle together: money, parachutes, everything. After refueling, we'll fly again with the captain and the crew. So don't worry about the police, sweetheart." I felt like I was going to vomit when he called me sweetheart. His dirty look made me feel so uncomfortable, like he was undressing me with his eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was planning something I didn't even want to think about. I quickly relayed what he said to the captain, and I could hear the lump in his throat when he replied, "Okay." Then he said, "Florence, I miss my daughter. Does this mean I'll see her again?" I couldn't answer. Cooper's gaze was fixed on me. Any wrong move could set him off, and with that gun and bomb in his hands, I had no idea what he was capable of. Then the captain called me again, telling me, "We're in Seattle, we'll be landing in 2 minutes." The sound of adults crying, children covering their mouths in fear, and the plane hitting the runway felt like the entire world was screaming. It was as though everyone else was escaping this nightmare, but the crew and the captain were about to face whatever came next. And that thought was driving me to the edge. When we landed, Cooper said, "Only one airline agent is allowed to approach the plane to exchange the money and parachutes. You're my agent to go get them and bring them back here. Got it?" I had no choice but to agree with him, so I nodded, showing I understood. The ground crew attached the mobile stairs, and I got off the plane. I brought the banknotes and placed them at the back of the plane. Then I went back down, grabbed 4 parachutes, and brought them on board. Cooper said he'd release the passengers after the refueling. The refueling took about 30 minutes, and Cooper got impatient, asking, "Why are you killing time? Tell them to hurry up." Once it was done, he released all 36 passengers safely, but he wouldn't let the flight attendants or captain leave the plane. What really shocked me was that Cooper handed out some of the dollars to the passengers as they left, telling them they could take the money if they wanted, but none of them took it. He even told me I could take as much as I wanted, but I refused to. I couldn't stop watching that young guy I'd had feelings for. He had left his pen and notepad on his seat, and as he walked off the plane, he gave me one last sad look. His eyes were filled with disappointment, and I could see tears streaming down his cheeks. I felt the same way. I couldn't understand why we had met, or why we couldn't get to know each other better. Why everything had to end like this. I picked up his notepad. He had written his phone number on it and a message. "I love you because you're brave and beautiful." But before I could do anything with it, Cooper grabbed the notepad from my hands, tore it into a million pieces, and told me, "If you try anything stupid, I'll kill you." That was when I completely lost hope of ever seeing that young guy again. The refueling was done, but Cooper had new demands. FBI agents and police were all around us, but they couldn't approach because of the passengers, the crew, and the captain still on board. I knew they'd be tracking us, but we'd be stuck with Cooper until the end of this nightmare. Then Cooper handed the pilot his flight plan and gave his instructions. A southeast course toward Mexico City, flying as slowly as possible without stalling the plane, around 100 knots, at a maximum altitude of 1____ feet. He also ordered that the landing gears stay deployed, the wing flaps be lowered to 15 degrees, and the cabin remains unpressurized. The captain told Cooper that these settings would limit the plane's range to about 1,000 miles, so they would need to refuel to make it to Mexico. After discussing options, they agreed on a refueling stop at Reno Tahoe International Airport. Cooper also demanded that the rear doors stay open, with the air stairs extended. Northwest officials pushed back, citing safety concerns, but Cooper calmly insisted, "It can be done, do it," and then didn't press the issue further. He added that he would lower the stairs once the plane was in the air. Cooper asked me to lower the aft stairs. He said he was afraid he might get sucked out of the plane and fall. We suggested he come to the cockpit and take an emergency rope to tie himself down, but he refused. He didn't want me to go up front or for the flight crew to come back. He kept expressing his fear, so I suggested he cut some cord from one of the parachutes to use as a safety line. He said he'd lower the stairs himself, and then told me to go to the cockpit, close the curtain between the economy and first-class sections, and not come back. Before I left, I begged Cooper, "Please, take the bomb with you." He told me he'd either disarm it or take it with him. As I walked toward the cockpit and turned to close the curtain, I saw him standing in the aisle, tying the money bag around his waist. I knew he planned to jump out of the plane, but I wasn't sure if he was really crazy enough to go through with it. From takeoff to when I entered the cockpit, only 4 or 5 minutes had passed. I stayed in the cockpit for the rest of the flight to Reno and was the last person to see Cooper. A few minutes later, a warning light flashed in the cockpit, signaling that the aft stairs had been deployed. I used the intercom to check in with Cooper and asked if he needed help, but his only response was a curt no. My colleagues and I could feel our ears pop from the pressure drop caused by the open stairs. With the rear door open and the stairs extended, we stayed in the cockpit, unsure if Cooper was still on board. I tried reaching him again over the intercom to let him know we were getting close to Reno and needed him to raise the stairs for a safe landing. I repeated my request several times, but there was no response. Around midnight, with the stairs still down, Flight 305 landed at Reno Tahoe International Airport. FBI agents, state troopers, sheriff's deputies, and Reno police set up a perimeter around the plane, but they didn't approach, fearing that Cooper and the bomb might still be on board. The captain and I searched the cabin and confirmed that the cabin was detained. After about 30 minutes, an FBI bomb squad declared the cabin safe. When I got off the plane, I just sat there on the ground, crying out loud, overwhelmed by all the sad memories that fate had thrown my way. I was lost in my thoughts, squeezing my eyes shut and opening them again, hoping it was all just a dream I could wake up from. But everything was real, and we were safe now. More than 50 years have passed since that day, and now I'm in my 80s. I don't know if I'll be here tomorrow or not. I later married a wonderful man and had a daughter who insisted I share this story on social media. But I still think about that young guy from that flight. I still remember his scent, his eyes, and his kind smile. The feeling and the love I had for him never came back, not even with my own husband. The case is still unsolved after 50 years, and the FBI still hasn't found Cooper. No one knows where he is, whether he's alive or not, or even any other details about him. After Cooper's jump, the police and FBI launched extensive searches in the forested and mountainous areas around the drop zone. Despite using advanced tracking equipment, they couldn't find any trace of him. Then, in 1980, $58,000 of the money Cooper had taken was discovered near the Columbia River in Oregon. This discovery suggested he may have landed nearby for a short time, but there was still no solid evidence to figure out where he actually landed or where he might have gone.